Today is September the 10th, 2019. My name is Tanya Fincham. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and today I am in Stillwater to interview Scott Petty, who is the Executive Director of the Stillwater Medical Foundation.
Correct.
Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And this is part of our O State Stories project, and we're going to focus a little bit later on the Homecoming Parade of 2015. So thank you for meeting with me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's begin with learning a little bit about you. When and where were you born?
I was born in McAllister, Oklahoma, southeast Oklahoma. Lived there for the first 5 years of my life, and then my dad joined a law practice out in the Panhandle of Oklahoma in Guyman, and so all my school days were actually in Guyman, and I graduated from Guyman High School in 1983.
So what year were you born?
I was born in 65.
65. McAllister to Guyman, that's quite a difference in geography and terrain.
That's exactly right. Pretty polar differences in the state of Oklahoma, for sure.
Did you participate in FFA or 4-H or anything like that while you were there?
I was more involved in community theater and speech and debate and choir, stage choir, those kinds of things.
Have a favorite teacher?
Yeah, probably the guy that ended up inspiring me to get into speech and debate. He was our speech and debate coach, and was one of my English teachers. Mike Patterson.
Okay.
He was a big influence.
And your dad was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And what did your mother do?
My mom got her degree in education after us kids were born. I have two sisters, and she went back to school, I think probably to finish, because she helped put my dad through law school, kind of put her educational career on hold, but went back and got her degree in elementary education. But she was a consummate volunteer and was very active in our church and in the community of Guyman, and is kind of the Johnny Appleseed of Guyman. A lot of trees around town were planted by my mom.
Oh, cool.
So, but she never really taught. I mean, she substitute taught, but did a lot of volunteering. That was kind of her deal.
Room mother, I bet, for school.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so where'd you go to college? I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway.
So I went to Oklahoma State University.
Why there?
A long history of family and love for Oklahoma State. My granddad, George Riley Petty, graduated in 1929 in electrical engineering, helped build the Grand River Dam, and both my parents attended Oklahoma State. My dad graduated from there. As I said, my mom went back later to Panhandle State. But a couple of my dad's brothers attended Oklahoma State as well, and so we had a big tradition of going to Oklahoma State. So we started going to football games in the mid '70s when I was early junior high, and so I just really became close to the community and the university.
So no others considered.
Not really.
Okay.
No, not really.
Do you remember the first day they came and dropped you off, or did you drive yourself?
I drove myself. My older sister's a couple of years older than me. She was already in school here, and so she kind of helped show me the ropes, when I first got here. And but she was not Greek, and so I had a roommate from my hometown, so I didn't join fraternity until my second semester. After my first semester, having been pretty involved in high school activities, I just thought, there's got to be something more, and so I did. I joined a fraternity and really enjoyed that experience, and probably inspired me to do some things on campus that I might not have done otherwise.
Including being Pistol Pete.
Including being Pistol Pete, yeah.
I think I had those years for 86, 87?
85 to 87.
Okay.
Yeah, I was alternate my first year, 85 to 87, and then in 85 to 86, and then 86 to 87 was the first year we actually had two Pistol Petes. The alternate was doing just as many events as the Pete that was selected, and so Dave Martin made the decision, our athletic department made the decision that we needed two Petes to be able to cover all the activities. And now those guys do about 700 appearances a year.
You maybe need 3 now.
Maybe need 3. Yeah, in fact, I was called last week, asked me if I wanted to be Pete at the Pro-Am, and I said, Becky, no. I've already had neck surgery once, and I don't think that's something I need to be doing at 54.
Well, did you have a favorite professor on campus?
Um,
Or favorite class, if you don't know professor?
yeah, Lee Manzer is probably hands down. Was my favorite professor, marketing professor. Most people would know Lee Manzer. He just had a knack and an ability to teach and engage and tell stories. He would directly relate a story to almost every principle, and because he worked at Dow Chemical and in business, he had practical, real world experiences, and then he just had that unique ability to connect with the students.
At that point, did you know what your long-term goals were going to be, your career goals?
I had no idea.
No idea.
No. No.
Not many do. Well, a lot don't. Let's put it that way.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So you graduated in 88?
88, yeah. Yeah, I changed my major four or 5 times, so I kind of navigated a variety of academic programs. But I started out in radio, television, film. I had worked at a radio station in high school, and so I kind of thought I might like to, Tom Brokaw, NBC News or something like that. And I did a sports internship at Channel 2 in Tulsa with Al Jerkins and Jeff Metters, and in sports, and it was a great experience, but it also told me that I didn't really want to be in the sports broadcasting world. I really admire those people. I love sports. I enjoy watching them, but I knew after that internship that was not really what I wanted to do. So many of those events happen on weekends and evenings and holidays, and it takes away family time, and so it just I think those people that are in that field make their family time in other ways, and the good ones do a great job with it. But I shifted focus a little bit, so I went into hotel restaurant, went into economics, and then I went back to the arts and sciences, to the journalism school, and I said, okay, I have got to graduate. I need to get my degree and get out of here. So she gave me two degree requirement sheets, and she said, well, these have the most electives. So it really helped because I could put my hotel restaurant, my economics, and some of the business stuff, and I was able to do my degree was in public relations, but that's in the School of Journalism. Strategic communications, I guess they call it today.
And you use those skills all along from looking at your resume.
Yeah, I have. It served me well.
So when you graduated, I'm assuming parents came from Guyman to watch graduation day?
Oh, sure. Yeah. My parents, as I mentioned, we started coming to football games here when I was a kid. So they've always had season tickets and big supporters of Oklahoma State.
So you've seen the facilities go from not so good to great.
Yeah, it's been neat to see the transformation and the investment that so many of our alumni have made.
While you were Pistol Pete, did you participate in the homecoming things, like for the parade, for instance?
Sure.
Do you have memories from that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And part of that is, today with social media, everything is captured and documented so differently. But now and then a picture will come up. There was just a picture that surfaced not long ago of me interacting with the San Diego Chicken. And I think I told that story on the history series I did with Jerry Gill many years ago. I'd never seen that picture before, but it surfaced from it may have been some historical archives from OSU. I don't know if it's from the library or what, but it was a picture of the San Diego Chicken and I hugging on the field. And I think what was actually happening was he was trying to grab my gun, and I wouldn't let him have the gun, which we just don't do. But so those kinds of events sometimes surface memories, and that's cool to see. But with social media, so many things are documented and captured. But yes, have been in the parade every year. I believe, every year since 1985.
Wow.
Because we would have one Pete that would have the head on, and then the other Pete would be there to kind of be with him and with the alumni pistol Petes. So the alumni pistol Petes have had a float for, I don't know, as long, since before I was around, for sure.
Well, then you're orange all the way that day, then.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure,
right.
For sure.
It's a neat time to kind of get with the guys that have been Pete, from years gone by, and reflect, and it's a neat club. There have been 90 students as of today that have been pistol Pete over the course of since 1958. So
that's great. Well, do you have a favorite spot on campus? Do you have a favorite place you like to?
I don't really probably go to a spot and reflect as I probably should, and as I'm sure a lot of alumni do. What?
Not the library.
Not at the library? No, but the library is such a pivotal, focal point for the campus. It's beautiful. I love driving down University and looking over and seeing it. But no, I guess probably Gallagher. I say Gallagher. Gallagher-Iba Arena is probably my favorite place because it's the first place I ever went to a wrestling match. And of course, John Smith and I were the same age, so I got to see him as a freshman and had never been to a wrestling match until I was probably a sophomore and was getting ready to try out for Pistol Pete. And so, and then just all the history there, with Cowboy basketball and Cowgirl basketball, because we attend all those events, and there's a lot of those events as Pistol Pete.
Yeah, there's a different energy in that.
There is a different, yeah. And it's come and gone over the years, but boy, it's an exciting place to be.
So after graduation, just take us through your career.
All right. Well, after graduation, my first job, I worked for a congressman. I worked 6 months to help him with his reelection campaign. Glenn English. He was the back when we had six districts in Oklahoma, and that was the majority of Western Oklahoma. And I helped him with his reelection campaign, and at the end of that, he offered the opportunity to go to Washington D.C. and I just I didn't really have that in my blood. I didn't really feel like I wanted to do that. I was pretty overwhelmed by watching him interact with people throughout the district and just how knowledgeable he was about their needs, their concerns, their issues, and it was very inspirational. It was very fulfilling to see him do what he did. He did it very well, and he did it for probably 20 years. I think from 74 to 94, he was the congressman out there. So my next job, so I had an opportunity to go to work for Oklahoma State University in student recruitment in high school and college relations, and loved that job. It was a great, it immersed me into things about Oklahoma State that I had no idea about: financial aid, scholarships. We talked about residential life, admissions process. And so that taught me a lot about the university. And so at the end of about 5 years of that, I had applied for a job with the OSU Foundation. Didn't get the job, but one of the guys I used as a reference was with the Osteopathic Medical Association in Texas. He had been at the College of Osteopathic Medicine, OSU's College of Osteopathic Medicine in Tulsa. And I got to know him pretty well, and he said, "Hey, I need an associate executive director down here in Texas. Would you be interested?" Never would have thought I'd end up in Texas. And so I asked my wife, I was like, "Jerry, what do you think about doing this?" And she said, "Let's check it out." So they flew me down, which was kind of a big deal. They flew me down to interview me and picked me up at the airport, and drove me to the hotel. And it was neat. It was very cool to see a different side of non-higher ed and non-government work. So I took the opportunity, and we were there about 2 years, and the OSU Foundation called, and they said it was about 18 months actually, and they said, "Hey, we have an opportunity we'd like you to apply for." So I applied, interviewed, and I don't know, 3 or 4 months had gone by. I hadn't heard anything. So I thought, well, they've hired somebody else. And the wheels of OSU kind of turn slowly sometimes. So they called and said, hey, we'd like you to start in January if you can. And so that was probably November. And so I told my wife, hey, I think we're going back to Stillwater. And she didn't really want to come. She was not bought in. She loved Texas. And but we had just found out we were about to have our first child. Our daughter Catherine was born about 9 months later. And so coming back closer to family was great. Now, present day, my wife would not. She loved Stillwater pretty quickly after we moved back. She just couldn't imagine moving back to a college town where we had just kind of, gone to school for 4 years, or she went for 4. I crammed 4 to 5. But so we came back and I went to work for Oklahoma State and did that for 10 years. So both of our kids were born here in Stillwater. Our daughter in 95, Catherine, and our son, Will, was born in 97. And Catherine went off to Clemson.
Go Tigers.
She decided she wanted to experience a different part of the country, and then our son is here at Oklahoma State now. He's a senior. So back to my job, I worked at Oklahoma State in the foundation for 10 years, from 95 to 05, and loved the experience, enjoyed representing our alma mater and really selling, to our alumni the needs, and tried to connect their needs and our or their interests and our needs, and ended up leaving as assistant vice president or associate vice president in planned giving, and so I learned a lot during that experience. Had a friend from church, actually, that was in our Sunday school class, said, hey, have you ever thought about doing something different than fundraising? And I said, oh yeah, from time to time I think about different things. And he said, well, I'm interested in hiring somebody that would hire dentists for our business. And so I thought, wow, how many dentists could you hire? But his vision was to create a chain of dental clinics that would kind of be like Southwest Airlines for the dental industry, and treat people amazing and do it the right way, and do things that a lot of dentists choose not to do, and mainly serve Medicaid patients. That was kind of the thrust of this practice. So you're serving an underprivileged population, and that appealed to me, to give back in a different way. So I thought, I was about to be 40 years old at that time, and I thought, if I'm going to do something different, I probably need to do it now before I'm too entrenched to make a change. And so I joined that group, Ocean Dental, and worked there for 7 years. And we grew that business from 3 dental practices in Oklahoma to 35 practices in 8 states. We did that in 6 years. So I was traveling a lot, and loved the experience, loved the people. Most of them were in it for the right reasons and really wanted to make a difference. But after that travel in 7 years, kind of wanted to come back. And we lived here the whole time. I just was on the go a lot. So ended up being attracted to the concept of this retirement community project and I had started talking to the hospital before that, but there was never just the right opportunity and timing. And so I came to work for the ranch, which was an Epworth Villa and Oklahoma State kind of venture, because the Emeriti faculty had been for years trying to get a retirement community in Stillwater that would be a continuum of care. So it would have independent living, assisted living, memory care, nursing, skilled nursing, the whole 9 yards. So that was a neat concept to me, and so I went to work for them and helped them find the property that they ultimately built on. We had some property out southwest of town that we tried to get rezoned, we tried to get water to it. And the city, unfortunately, couldn't tell us when we could have water at that site. They thought it might be 2016, 17 or so. And so we couldn't wait. Well, I think they may still just now be getting water, and here we are, in 2019. So it was a good decision to go somewhere else, but we didn't have a choice because they couldn't tell us when we could have water, and that was key. That was critical to our building project. So we worked to find another piece of property and landed out north of town next to Lakeside Golf Course. The Watkins owned a lot of that property. Their home was there, Lou and Wes Watkins. And so we started working with them, talking about the possibility of purchasing the other lots in their neighborhood, and as well as the homes. There were 3 or 4 homes that were occupied. And I didn't really know if that was going to happen or not. And about that time, I started talking to the hospital. We did get the property rezoned for multi-use, and so before we left, we were in contract negotiations with them to purchase that property, and that actually happened within a few months, maybe 6 months after I left. They agreed on a price, and so the Epworth entity purchased that land, and then financially. And this was kind of in the back of my mind the whole time because it was $100 million project. It's a big project. I thought I just don't know financially how they're going to make it work. But they had some very intelligent people that were running the bond plan and had a real timeline to make it happen. Well, they didn't get as many depositors as they needed, and so the bonds were called, and they had to liquidate. And so it was an unfortunate set of circumstances, but now it's been picked up again, and it's happening. I think I just met the executive director last week at a deal, so I know it's going to happen, and it looks like it's happening now. So it's going to be a fantastic facility for our community. But so that was my 13 months at a very brief stay, but I love that experience too as a Methodist. Love the concept of that. Then I went to work for the hospital. I've now been at the hospital 6.5 years. Time flies. I spent the first 2 years in practice management. So similar to what I did with the doctor recruitment and relations with Ocean Dental, but more of developing processes for the front desk and making sure that we were consistent with the way we managed patients and their families and their data and their privacy. And so I did that for 2 years in physician practice management. And then Teresa retired from the foundation, and they asked me if I would be interested in leading the foundation. And I had never really thought about going back into the nonprofit world in this way, but the stars just aligned. And so I served as interim for a month or two and loved it. It's very different from the university nonprofit world, just because you don't have alumni that have this love and this bond, but you do have grateful patients and people that really believe that and feel that you've made a difference in their life and their well-being and their health or their loved one. And so that's been neat to be a part of this organization. So I've been now in this capacity, as I said, about 4.5 years.
So around 2015-ish, 2015.
Yes, yeah, it was early 2015 when I accepted the role, or March, I guess. Maybe I started in April.
Was that about the time they were planning these new buildings?
Yeah, the property had already been acquired, and they had already brought all of the soil up to kind of level it out and help lift it up out of the floodplain. The building to the east of us here, from where we sit on 12th Street, the Total Fitness Aquatic Center, was the first constructed. And so, yes, I helped kind of finish the fundraising for the Total Fitness Aquatics pool, which was a big project. And so I think we raised money for about 4 years for that before I came. So I was on the tail end of that. But yeah, it was the first building out here on this campus.
So today, in a typical day, what would you do? This is not a typical day, but
Yeah, no.
a typical day.
So in a typical day, I am I'm either meeting with individuals. Always go by the hospital and check in on patients that we know that have been donors, just to see how they're doing and let them know, hey, reach out if you need anything, and just to check on people when they're going through surgeries. Our volunteers at the hospital are so important, and they are some of the most giving, compassionate, and dedicated people that you'll meet. And I've found that those people oftentimes, they want to give back in ways that you never would have imagined, because they're towards the end of their time, and they feel like that they can make a difference in ways that maybe they never imagined. And so there have been several major donors from our volunteer ranks, and it just makes sense because they're giving of their time. They're volunteering their time, and some volunteer 2 or 3 or 4 days a week. Some volunteer 1 day a week for half a day. But we have about 150 volunteers that do different things at the hospital, from greeting people and checking them in, helping them get registered, to walking them out as they're taking their new baby home. And so it's very rewarding. And I remember Maxine Calm was one of our volunteers at the hospital back when we had our kids. And she was so sweet and just sincere and dedicated and committed to making sure that you had a great experience while you were at Stillwater Medical. And I remember that very clearly. And we would see her at church, and she would always ask about the kids. And so those people really are difference makers in our community and in our hospital. So interacting with those folks, that's kind of a kind of roundabout way, but that's kind of my day. I try to, there's 1 day a week, I try to have, there's a coffee group of senior gentlemen that I meet with, and there's a couple of groups actually that I'll drop in on, and I learn a lot from those guys. You know, I mean, there's a lot of sincerity and knowledge and humanitarian hearts, and you just can learn a lot from people that have, you know, that whether they fought in a war or, you know, raised 6 kids, you just you can learn a lot from those guys.
So in this particular position, you don't have to hop on a plane very often.
I really don't. No. Now I will say, we do have donors that live out of state, and often, and it's been interesting how those have come about. One of them, it came about through the Homecoming tragedy, but or one that comes to mind anyway. I'm sure I know we have had several that became donors of the hospital through that ordeal. But one in particular, his daughter died unexpectedly at 54. She was a pharmacist, and she left her estate to her father. She had no children. She had not been married. And then his other daughter predeceased him as well, and then his wife. And so he had no heirs. And his wish was that when he passed, that he would leave a legacy for Stillwater Medical. But before that, he had made a commitment to, with his broker, that he was going to give back her estate to the hospital once her retirement investment reached $1 million. So he gave $1 million, and that was not my doing. It was right about the time I came. But my first job was to go see him and thank him, and he lived in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So I drove over to see him, and I think he thought I was probably going to come and ask him for more. But my goal was to thank him. My goal was to express our genuine gratitude for his generosity. And it was an amazing experience. He was very guarded the first time we met. But when I brought him a pie, because I knew that I had heard that he was a big pie fan. And we just kind of hit it off and really developed a nice rapport. And then I went back a month or 2 later, and I asked him if he would be willing, because that money was to support the pharmacy. And I asked him if he would be willing to allow us to use some of that money for medical excellence. So it was a little bit more broad. And if he would be willing to do that, then we could use it maybe to buy equipment for another department or maybe even a construction project. And he really liked that idea. And so we kind of developed a greater connection. And I said, hey, do you mind if I just ask you some questions and record our conversation and kind of document that? And so he said, no, I think that'd be okay. And he's a very serious guy. He was in the Army and was a sharpshooter, and I mean, just a interesting fellow. Had an interesting career. Built houses, was in the insurance business, and anyway, so I go and set up my camera and visit with him in his office in his house, and I ask him about his daughter, and he just tells this very heartfelt, this is who I am. And he told me after that, he said, I'm gonna put you in our estate, in my estate. But he didn't say how much or whatever. He left us his entire estate. And he died 6 months later. And I never knew he was sick. He never alluded to that, any health complications. But he was 86. He had lived a long life, and he wanted to make a difference. And so anyway, that was one of our largest donors that year. And then we had to go through the process of selling his home and his assets. And he had a huge collection of silver bars and gold coins. And it just, so all told, it was over $2 million, the estate. So those kinds of things just kind of happen. And, but it's all about developing relationships, and I don't know, how we were able to develop that, and then really, literally 6 months after we videoed that, he passed away, and that was unfortunate. But he really made a difference, and maybe that's what he was hanging on for, was to give back, and he really wanted to do that in his daughter's honor. So the Randall estate has made a big impact in Stillwater Medical.
I think being genuine with him helped, I would think.
Certainly.
Well, did you have to deal with selling the estate things? Or when someone on those...
We did. I mean, we did. I worked very closely with a couple of our bankers that were on our hospital foundation board. And literally, after he died, and I had no idea he had these coins and these silver bars. And I mean, literally, he had these silver bars that were stacked in a building out behind his house. And this is this generation of just, hey, being prepared for anything. And he had these coins. It was amazing. And so when I found out, his attorney told me this stuff is there and nobody lives there. And I'm just thinking, that's a formula for a problem. So literally, a local banker and I went and picked up and loaded up in his Tahoe everything of significant value. The coins, I mean, we went to the bank. There was $40,000 in cash. I mean, there were just things that you would never imagine. I talked to a local auctioneer, and he said, Scott, I've been in the auctioneer business 50 years here. I've never seen something like this. And so we had 3 different auctions to auction that off, but we had to catalog every single thing that we had. And we had one auction in Fort Smith with the house and all the household goods. But then we had 2 auctions in Oklahoma City because we wanted to have a bigger population to draw. That's just not something you want to have in a smaller town. And so those 2 auctions in Oklahoma City did even better than the one in Fort Smith. But he lived very modestly. It was the classic millionaire next door kind of deal. And he was truly, I think, committed to making a legacy for his daughter, and he's done that. So thanks, Mr. Randall.
Yes. It's a lot of little details you don't think you'd have to deal with.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. It's very rewarding, though.
You mentioned earlier the homecoming parade, so we want to fast forward to that day.
Sure.
October 24th, 2015. Start your day.
Yeah.
Your day. So
my day started homecoming morning, like it does every year at homecoming. The Pistol Pete alumni gather at a given point near the beginning of the parade route, and we're getting the trailer together, and the guys are kind of coming one by one. A lot of them driving in from a couple hours away or further. Some have flown in the day before and from out of state, and so we're getting together and on the float that we have every year for the alumni Pete's, just doing our regular thing, and we turn the corner right there at Washington and Hall of Fame and or Main Street and Hall of Fame, and wave to people like we always do all throughout the route, and it's pretty typical homecoming parade. It was kind of chilly that morning, and that was kind of it. My daughter was in town. She was visiting us and her boyfriend, who was a student at Oklahoma State, and so that was nice to have her in town, and she was hanging out with him at a different location. And so I went back, as I always do, to where my parents were sitting and watched the finish of the parade. And so we're gathered, getting ready to go park a car at the posse parking. So we've got one car there. If somebody wants to leave the game early or gets cold or tired, they can do that. My folks are in their 80s. Actually, they were in their 70s at that point. But so as we're leaving the parking lot there by near the 3rd Street Bank SMB drive-through, a gentleman has a heart attack there in the parking lot, and there's an ambulance there. And of course, I didn't know any of that at the time, but I saw the ambulance and thought, oh, I hope that person's okay, and kind of went on about our day. Well, my daughter calls as we're driving by that scene, and she said, "Dad, what's going on?" And I said, I don't know. What do you mean? And she said, well, something has happened. Something bad has happened. I'm seeing these people crying and coming towards us with distraught looks on their face. And I said, I don't know. Where are you? And she was a few blocks closer towards the Sonic on Main Street. And I said, well, I don't know what's happened, but you should go a couple of blocks over, because my mind automatically went to the worst case scenario. If people are looking distraught, you want to get away from that situation no matter what it is. And so anyway, I still didn't know really what had happened. I thought maybe somebody had fallen off of a float, or you didn't know. So we parked the car, and I'm in a separate car from my wife. I get on, I start heading home, and I hear there's been an accident or an incident at the corner of Main Street and Hall of Fame. And so I call our PR director, and I said, Shiloh, what is, has something happened? What's going on? And she said, oh, there's been a horrible event. And so, sorry.
That's okay.
She, kind of tells me what she knows. And I said, do you need me? Do you need me to do anything? And she said, yeah, I think we need help with the media. I think we need help with families, because I'm not a clinical person. I'm not able to help in the ways that our clinicians do. Anyway, so I went to the house and I told my wife, I said, hey, there has been an incident at the end of the parade route. I'm going to go. She said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do, but they need me at the hospital. So I went up to the hospital and I said, I'll meet you guys at the football game whenever I can. So I went to the hospital, and there were already, quite a few people gathering there. And so my job was to kind of keep, if media came, certainly try to keep them away from family members, and try to keep family out of the hospital waiting, the emergency room waiting area, because it was filling up. And we have a little conference room right across the hall from the ER. And so we were gathering people over there. And one of the things our hospital does very well is communicate with our patients. And that's very deliberate, and their families. And that's very deliberate because there's nothing worse than getting care and somebody just starting to work on you and not tell you why they're doing what they're doing. And of course, they're there to help you, but if they're there to take vitals or take blood or, assess you, you kind of want to know what they're doing. And so what I did is what our clinicians do, and it's called AIDIT. It's where we acknowledge, we introduce, we tell them how long we're going to do what we're doing with them, we educate them, and we thank them. So AIDIT is an acronym for these things. Every employee in the hospital is supposed to use their AIDIT when they introduce themselves to a patient. It's a reassuring action that lets them know you're there to help them, how long it should take. Sometimes it takes longer than others. But it's also just good to know what you know and to help share and impart that this is what we're doing. So I addressed this small group of family members and friends that had come to the hospital to find out if their loved one was there. Some of them didn't know. Some of them knew that their loved one was there. And so I introduced myself and told them that we would keep them apprised, that as we learned things, we would share that with them, but that we needed them to stay in this area. If they needed water, and people started bringing water and snacks and things. Told them where the restrooms were, just the basic things to help them know that we're here for them. And of course, with social media, they were learning more from their friends and loved ones than we were probably about their situation. But as I walked out into the hall, I bumped into a friend from my Rotary group, and I didn't really recognize him because he wasn't wearing his typical Rotary clothing, and nor was I. I didn't have on my name badge. I mean, we're always supposed to wear our badge when we're on property of the hospital for security, as well as it lets us know who should or shouldn't be in certain areas of the care facilities. And so this gentleman said, "Scott, I need help finding my daughter. Both of my daughters were injured in this," and it occurred to me who he was. And so his daughters just happened to be standing on that corner where the car came through and hit the crowd. And one of his daughters was at Stillwater Medical, and she was seriously injured, and the other one was flown, but he didn't know where. And so I went into the ER and I started asking people if we knew who was communicating with the helicopter units and who was communicating with police, and just trying to gain a sense of what was happening and where people were. And here's this dad he knows his daughter's been flown somewhere because the other daughter was conscious and could tell him, "Dad, they took her," and it took us quite a while to find where she had been flown. Finally did, and but that was how the day started and rapidly evolved. And there were a lot of things that I saw in that ER that day that I never thought I'd see. But our physicians and our administration, they did an amazing job, and I think anybody would tell you that. I mean, they were very deliberate. They were very on task. But that's how that ER operates every day. It's just there were more people there that day.
Had there been procedures in place or drills for an event such as this?
They're always prepared for something big. Until it happens, though, you don't know how everyone's going to react. You have an idea of how everyone's supposed to act or react, but the electronic medical record, which every hospital has, is cumbersome. I think every physician or nurse would tell you it's cumbersome. And so to be able to rapidly do what you have to do, sometimes you have to pivot and do something else. And so I think they went to paper. I think that they went to things that were going to be more quickly enable them to document things and move on. They were rolling the X-ray, the mobile X-ray unit, in and out of these rooms to X-ray people. And we had one patient in particular that came to our hospital that we didn't think was critically injured, because we didn't think. I mean, whoever assessed her at the site of the crash thought she had a broken leg and didn't know she had internal injuries. And as it turned out, she even had a broken spine. And so we determined that at our hospital and realized we can't take care of her here. She's going to need a higher level of care. So that's where all those helicopters came in, and many were lifted from the site of the crash, and they like clockwork handled things so well. And if that event had to have happened at the end of the parade route, and at the end of the parade could not have been probably any better of a situation, because there were firemen there were National Guard feet away, there were police, there were OHP, sheriff, there were doctors and nurses that just happened to have been in that area of the impact. And so with 50 people injured, impacted some way, and 4 that died, to have that many first responders within that proximity was providential.
Could not have been planned.
No, and it's horrible to say it couldn't have happened at a better time. But I mean, if it would have happened at the beginning of the parade, there wouldn't have been those fire trucks right there. There wouldn't have been people starting to already leave the parade route, because, as I said, they were between where the Sonic is. The fire trucks were between where the Sonic is and the corner of where Hastings sat. And so they were literally just a few hundred feet away from impact. And timing, just, it was everything that day.
Well, after the day had finished, or the next day, probably the next week, did the hospital stop and reassess what they could have done differently? Yes. And change, prepare better for the next?
Sure. I think the all call went well. We had every physician that was on call or not was there. If there was a physician in town, he or she was there to help, and it was a great team effort. And those, as I said, I mean, our hospital handled it very well. But yes, we did an assessment afterwards, as I know the city did, and I believe they felt like they did a lot of things right. And until you're thrust into a mass casualty incident, you hope that everything that you're prepared for goes right and well. But it let us know that we're on our game. And we had physicians from other towns that just happened to be in town for the game that came to the hospital, and there are certain processes you have to do to get people approved and credentialed to treat and care for patients. So we were able to do that in an expeditious manner, and having a pediatric trauma physician right there was as helpful as it could have been that day.
And so switching from electronic to paper will become part of the acceptable procedures? Well,
and it was in that situation. I'm sure it's been done before in other hospitals as well, because you're forced. The electronic record requires you to enter so much data and go through certain fields, and it's just cumbersome. And in a mass casualty event, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, was HIPAA a problem for people trying to find out where their person had gone?
Possibly, and it's a lot different today than it was even 20 years ago. I think once we validated that a family member was truly a family member, I mean, we did everything that we could do to help that. It was really the fact that at the site, at the crash site, although they were assessing injuries and they were tagging, they literally put a tag on every patient that whether they're critical, whether there's different stages, and I reference them in the book that I wrote. But that helps. It helps the next person providing care to know what their level of need is. And when you're talking about instantly having 20 people that have critical injuries, and some went in a vehicle to the hospital, not an ambulance, some went, in a helicopter directly somewhere else. Nobody was really right there chronicling every single person and where they were going, and that's why that dad couldn't find where his daughter had been flown. Nobody at the scene knew exactly where they'd been flown, but a couple of times the aircraft got up, started heading to Oklahoma City, and then got diverted to Tulsa because they said we have too many of that injury right there, and we need to send that to Tulsa now. So there were situations like that where, if you got so many broken legs and limbs, and there's so many doctors on call in Oklahoma City at the trauma center, they can only do so many surgeries, in a given time, and some of those were really critical and needed care right away. So there were a lot of stories where it took several minutes, if not a few hours, for people to really know where somebody went, and that's unsettling as a family member for sure.
Sure. Hopefully that won't ever happen again, but next time there may be someone that's assigned to do
Absolutely.
to do that.
And I know that the city really assessed those things as well. The city really did a nice job in handling, and Rob Hill and his team. They do a great job every parade. There's so much that goes into the preparation of those events, and so kudos to them for helping make it very smooth. And I know they really assessed what they did right and what they could do better.
So does anything come to mind that the hospital changed, how they did things, or
I don't know that anything was changed. We're coming up on 4 years ago now, and I'm nothing comes to mind that was changed. I'm sure there were some things that we felt like, hey, we need to do that better. But just, the way we separated the people in the waiting room, because that waiting room is just not very large for that number of people and family members and friends that are there to check on their loved ones. So, and that's why we kind of had to have that relief valve over across the hall in the conference room to the West conference room.
So did you make it to the game?
I ultimately did. But it was, I went inside. I was late. I don't know. It was into the second quarter probably. It was almost halftime, I think. Went in and sat down, and I was just overwhelmed. I've never felt that way, and so I just felt like there was something more I should do. I kind of had that on my heart that, that there's still people hurting and that their family members are going through this tragedy. And so I went out at that time. Well, I went outside at halftime. I left and met up with my wife. I honestly, I don't remember the second half of the game. I know I went back in for a while. But the day is kind of foggy after that.
And your mind started thinking, okay, what else can we do next?
Yeah. So I had a concern that, in a large event like this, where you have people that have lost their lives, have critical injuries. There's a lot of expense that's going to be coming down the road for those people. And I started seeing on social media GoFundMe accounts and things pop up that I thought, God, I wonder if that's legitimate. I wonder if that's really that family member or this person's friend. Are they really going to give those funds to this person that needs it? And so that night, I decided that our foundation, the Stillwater Medical Foundation, could accept donations and then provide them to those families. I didn't know exactly how we were going to do all that, but I just knew that it was the right thing to do, and we could be transparent and allow people to make a charitable donation and enable some type of assistance financially, and let them know that we were going to distribute it as equitably as we could. Because in those GoFundMe situations, that's a private company. They're taking 10% off the top. There's a fee that comes out of every donation given. There's a fee, and then there's 10% off the top. So, I mean, I know people are helping, and I don't want to knock this business idea that someone had to help other people fund things, but it's a business. There's people making money, lots of money, off of that, and I wanted to provide an avenue for people to give a charitable gift, so they were able to get a tax write-off if they wanted to. And as I mentioned, it paid off big because we had a family from out of state that contacted us within a week and said, "I see you all are accepting donations. I'd like to make a gift. I'm going to send you $10,000." And at the time, Tanya, I didn't know if we'd raise 10 or 50,000, 20,000. I didn't know, how much we'd raise. But I knew that we could at least be a transparent option for people to give. And so we put it out there that we're going to do this and help these families, whether they came to Stillwater Medical or not. We wanted to help them. And so we had to create, some checks and balances to make sure we were tracking the right way, these gifts. And we had to, we're still very manual in this small foundation. We handwrite our receipts, and the process is very personal, and that's intentional because we are a small foundation. And so this gentleman said, "I'm going to give you $10,000," and I thought, wow, I never even had met this guy. Had never heard his name before, and he wanted to make it anonymous. Fine. He called me a week later, and he said, "Scott, I'm going to do something else." He said, "If you can raise $20,000 between now and Christmas, I'll match 2 to 1 every dollar you make. So I'll give you another $40,000 if you can raise 20." And I thought, I don't know if we can raise 20, but I'll take your challenge. So as luck would have it, Larry Reese would call me later that week and said, "Hey, we want to pass the bucket at the OU game." And I thought, man, I don't know that we have time to orchestrate that, Larry. I love the idea and the intent behind it, but I don't know if I can commit to getting the volunteers. And he said, "We're going to help. We're going to make it happen." He said, we'll get people, and we'll help you." So, I brought our alumni Pistol Pete group, and we had cheerleaders from OSU's Spirit Squad, as well as the Stillwater High School Spirit Squad. We passed the bucket, and we raised what we needed to get that full match. But it wasn't just that. It was a student that contacted me literally the day after the crash in Jacqueline Lane. She said, "I know you don't know me. I'm in student government. I want to help. I have an idea of creating a shirt." And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can get into the shirt making business. And I thought, I know one person that does make shirts really well, and I can reach out to him because I know him and he trusts me and I trust him. And if he wants to do it, he'll do it. But if he doesn't, he gets hit up a lot for different opportunities to help people. And so I called Stan Clark at Eskimo Joe's and I said, hey, a student has an idea and I'd like to bring her over and introduce you to her. Because I had already met her by that point. On Monday we met. And she and her friend Jeremiah had this idea that they were going to create a shirt. And that became the single largest donation, was from that shirt sale. And they sold about $83,000 worth of shirts. 10,000 units in basically 8 weeks. And so that student made a huge difference. And I'm forever grateful for Jacqueline. And the next year, she was our homecoming queen at Oklahoma State. So she's a very giving person and really worked hard to make that happen with a lot of other people. But those are just, a few of the stories that I touch on in the book about those that really wanted to do something good. And it took a little while to determine how we were going to equitably distribute that, what ended up being $485,000 that we raised basically in a little over 8 weeks. And we had distributed 100% of that within 4 months. Our foundation created a plan where we had 3 categories of people: those that died, those that were critically injured and were going to have long-term recovery, and those that were treated and released. And so we developed a level of, this is what you're going to get if you've lost a loved one. This is what you're going to get if you're going to have long-term recovery and physical therapy and surgeries, and this is what you're going to get if you were treated and released, that we could document. And we looked at public records from the police, from court records, to make sure we had all the names. And I'm sure there are a few people that didn't need it, didn't care to have the funding, and we're grateful for those people. But I'm also very grateful to the Stones, the Stone family. Marvin and Bonnie Stone had no children. And Marvin's brother and his sister and their siblings and his mother even, Marvin's mother is 90 years old. And they agreed, because we gave everybody this option, to pay it forward. If they felt like they didn't need those funds for burial services or recovery. And we had one person that was critically injured that paid it forward as well. That said, I have insurance, I have other people that have helped me. And that person I know was in the hospital a long time. But they paid it forward. And so we were able to redistribute those funds to those victims that had critical needs, that we knew had long-term recovery or injuries that were gonna be difficult to overcome. And so that process, like I said, it was done by April. And we learned from looking at other experiences in other places in a mass casualty incident. It creates a lot of problems when you hold some money back for future needs, because some people are going to have huge future needs, and some people are able to recover and be resilient in other ways, or have financial assistance in other ways. And we wanted to get all of the funds to the families that we knew needed it. And so that's why it was done relatively quickly. I am just so grateful for the goodness of our community and those that went out of their way that day to help. Jacqueline Lane's dad is a doctor, works in a hospital up in Colorado, and just happened to be walking down the sidewalk when the incident occurred. And he immediately flew into action and got rubber gloves on from one of the fire units and was able to help assess and triage. And it's just things like that just people were in the right place at the right time to try to make a difference.
And does the pen come into play for the foundation part?
Yeah, a gentleman in a fraternity said, "Hey, I want to donate these," and so we had a couple of different lapel pins. We have another one that I talk about in the book as well. That Alan Adams from All American Computer, he created this one that was the state of Oklahoma, and it had a orange ribbon in it, and it said Stillwater Strong, and that was the first Stillwater Strong lapel pin that came out. And so he said, "Hey, I don't know what you want to do with these. How many do you think you could use?" And I said, "Well, how many? I mean, how much do you want to sell those for? I mean, I got to be careful about just going and buying things that I'm going to try to resell." And he said, "I'll give them to you." He said, I said, "I don't know, maybe 250. He goes, "How about 1,000?" I said, "Okay." So he sent me, a couple of different shipments of 250, 500, to another 250. And we got them to the banks. The banks sold them. And then, we gave them to family members and those kinds of things. But this one was made a little bit later. But I got one of those to Ricky Fowler. He was a guest picker at the OU game that day whenever we played OU, and he had popped it in his hat. And so it was on national TV that day, and it got a lot of exposure for what we were trying to do and help these families. But yeah, this lapel pin came a little bit later after it was decided that a memorial was going to be built. Gary Sparks, an architect that's been amazing. He's a good friend and a guy that has been very generous with his time in helping redesign the Gallagher-Iba renovation as well as the expansion of Boone Pickens Stadium. He designed all that. He contacted me, and he did the memorial also for the Remember the 10 in Colorado and in Stillwater. And so he said, "Hey, just a day or two after the crash," he said, "Scott, I know now's not the time, but when the time is right, I'll donate my services to design a memorial and help you guys create it, engineer it, whatever." And I said, "Gary, that's awesome," and so pretty quickly thereafter, we met with city officials because I said, it's not just me. I mean, I can help connect you with the right people, but I mean, the city has got to embrace this. We got to find the right place for it. And as it turned out, there was property right there next to the crash site that was just fitting. It was just a fitting place for it. And the city was willing to allow that property to be used. It really wasn't being used for anything. It had some Bradford pear trees on it that needed to be coming down before too long, and were looking kind of tired. So that's where the ribbon is now on a pedestal. And I wrote the book to tell some of these positive stories, to help us document what had happened, because there were so many people that did so many good things, not just then, but in the days that followed. And I think it always happens. It brings out the best in people when there's been a tragedy. And I felt like there were some stories that need to be told. And we've experienced tragedy here at Oklahoma State several times. And I think a lot of people had never heard about the 1977 homecoming incident. And I thought, 60 years from now, it would be a shame if people didn't remember what happened on this day. And just how good Stillwater and Oklahoma State University people are. And so I thought I was writing a chapter for some future book about the hospital. I really did. There's a book about the history of Stillwater Medical, and I thought I was writing a chapter, and it just kept going, and it kept going. And the next thing I knew, somebody would say, "Have you spoken to Rob Hill? Have you spoken to this police psychologist? Have you spoken to this victim, this survivor, this first eyewitness person that tried to stop her?" And the next thing I knew, I had written a lot. And I asked a friend who has written a couple of books. I said, I never imagined I would really write a book. I've always been a writer and kind of a creative thinker like that. but I was not a great student. But I'm creative in the way I look at things, and so it's been a passion. I've written poetry for 35 years, and I just felt like I needed to tell this story, and I knew I could tell it because of my love, my experience from OSU, my working at the hospital, and my getting to see firsthand the tremendous care and heart that our physicians have, and it was just the right thing to do. And so I knew I did not want to benefit financially. I didn't need to benefit financially from writing it. I wanted to tell the stories of these people that were tremendously impacted this day so that they could remember. And I scratched the surface. There are so many stories that were not told. And that's unfortunate. There were stories that I wrote about that didn't actually make it into the book because I had to cut down and limit, I mean, there's already a ton of names in that book, and it's confusing sometimes. But I'm very proud of that, what I wrote, and I'm very fulfilled that I was able to sell, I don't know, in excess of 1,000 copies within several months. And then I'm donating 100% of the profits of that book and donated $8,000 to this memorial to help finish it up. It was about $90,000 for that memorial. I think 87,000. You wouldn't think that looking at it, but there's engineering, there's concrete, there's this metal ribbon that was formed, handmade metal ribbon that had to be formed and welded and painted and installed, and so a lot went into that. And but a lot of people helped make that happen too. I was just one player on the team. But I just felt like I knew so many stories that I could tell them in a way, and great thanks to Christine Waits and Quinn Baldwin, because they really helped me kind of figure out the best way to lay it out. But it takes determination and dedication to write something like that.
And the title was?
Stillwater Strong, Loyal and True.
And that's the name of the memorial too, Stillwater Strong?
Stillwater Strong Memorial, yes.
Where did that come from?
Well, so many times in these horrific events, the word strong is used. It happened with Boston Strong. It's happened with so many events where they just add the word strong. I don't know the first person that tweeted it or put it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, but somebody did. Somebody was the first one to do it. It wasn't me. But I had to go through a process to make sure I could use that as the title. And I got legal advice, and I got a lot of help from people a lot smarter than I to make sure that I stayed within the bounds. I didn't talk about the driver. This story is not about her. This story is about the goodness and the resilience of Stillwater. And anybody that wanted to read about her, I mean, they can read the papers. They can read the accounts. That I never mentioned her name in the book, and that was intentional, because this story is about the great people of Stillwater and the state of Oklahoma, and just the people that made a difference that day and in the days that followed. There are a lot of people that helped with the recovery of these people that were really seriously injured and had post-traumatic stress. I mean, I didn't see it occur, but clearly it still impacts me. It impacts a lot of people. I'm named after my uncle, who died in a plane crash 9 years before I was born. My dad was a senior in high school, and my parents were high school sweethearts when that happened. And I never knew him. I never knew my uncle. Andy Hancock never knew her dad. He died 2 months after she was born. But it's still painful. And the family hurts from that loss. And I felt like my uncle was 23 years old in the Air Force when that happened. And I started to tell a little bit more about that in the book, but it just didn't fit. It really didn't fit. It inspired me to find the silver lining and the good, but there may be another chapter written later about that. But this story was meant to be so people in the future years could understand and respect our history in a different way. Because a lot of people didn't know that Henry Bennett died in a plane crash. He was a president of our university, So I felt like, though, kind of recounting some of those things to kind of lead up to, this is what makes Stillwater strong, because it is. I mean, Oklahomans are strong, but we're fortunate to be the people that we are. And I felt a deep obligation to tell that.
Good way to connect to the next generation. What about the color choices?
Well, Stillwater, of course, the Stillwater High School is blue and yellow, or blue and gold. The Stillwater colors of Stillwater are blue, and there's a different variation of blue that the city of Stillwater uses. But that's really where it kind of intertwines Stillwater and Oklahoma State. That's where blue and orange kind of became the theme for this.
Did you attend dedication, the memorial dedication?
I did. I was asked to speak, and I really felt like it was better for other people to speak. I wanted to be in the background that day. I never did any of this for attention, or it just felt like the right thing for me to do, because as I said, I felt like my story has been Oklahoma State and Stillwater, and I was able to see things and share things in a way that was very respectful. I let every single person that I wrote about read their story. I interviewed and recorded their interviews so I could go back to it and listen to it and make sure that I captured correctly what they said. And that was very important to me, to not have anything out there that was questionable, or I didn't really say that. I mean, it happens often in the media, unfortunately. And it was really important to me to make this accurate and a solid piece. And so I guess I felt like this is our community story, and I don't need to be on the center stage that day. So Kyle Eastham, who was in Leadership Stillwater, and they helped pass the bucket to help raise funds for the memorial. Because, as I said, I was going to donate the profits of the book, but I didn't really know, if people would buy it, or, I did a lot of book signings last year to try to promote it. And that was very fulfilling. It was emotional, because I had people come up to me and tell me their stories that I hadn't heard before, and that was unexpected. I saw a lot of grateful people, and just learned how terrific, our people are, whether they're OSU or Stillwater people, or Oklahoma people. They were very supportive of this. And for Kyle Eastham to say, hey, Leadership Stillwater is going to pass this bucket, and for the university to allow it for that purpose, and that raised about $30,000 range for the memorial. And that's a huge chunk. It may have been even closer to 40,000 because we passed the bucket, obviously, also at that OU game, and then we passed for the victims and the survivors. But then we passed it for the memorial at the homecoming game. I guess it was just 2 years ago. And so that was amazing, to be able to have that shot of support from financially to help make it happen.
Well, when Homecoming 2016 rolled around, did you do anything differently that day?
I took it all in. And part of that was Abigail Ogle, Channel 5, did a story where she interviewed a few of the victims, first responders. The fire chief was there, Rob Hill was there, the CEO of our hospital was there, I was there, an eyewitness was there, and little Hadley was there. She was one of those victims that was critically injured. And hearing their stories and hearing them reflect on that day 1 year later was impactful. It was pretty hard. But I think these events, they make us realize the fragility of life and just how grateful we should be for what we've been given and how we've been blessed. And there are a lot of people whose lives are cut short, like little Nash Lucas, that it should make us grateful. It should make us pause and reflect and be appreciative for what we've been given, and for the life that we've lived. And it should inspire us to want to give back and to want to make a difference. And I have come to know so many giving people working in this nonprofit world. I say I've been in healthcare nonprofits for 31 years now, and you see all different kinds of giving. You see the kind of giving where it is just sincere, and people don't want their name on anything. They don't want people to know. And then you see the kind of giving that's difference making. And Boone Pickens is a great example of that. I mean, yeah, he's got his name on a lot of things in a lot of places. But boy, he's made a difference, and he's inspired others to do so. And so that 1 year later was time to reflect, and seeing those horses with no riders, to respect those that we lost, was powerful. It was powerful. So.
Long day, emotional day too.
Yeah, it was, and it's part of our story.
Yeah, Stillwater Strong. You were instrumental in several of those things, so the city's lucky to have you back.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and like I said, I didn't do it alone. There have been a lot of people that want to be behind the scenes and just want to make a difference, and I'm very grateful for those individuals because, as I said, just like the anonymous donor from out of state, that individual has continued giving to the hospital in a very, very generous way. And our paths probably never would have crossed. And it's sad that our paths had to cross this way, but that family has been a difference maker for Stillwater Medical now, and I'm forever grateful for them and for all the other ones that did so many things. Just like the elementary school in Oklahoma City, that they called me and said, "Hey, we want to present you a check for these victims." I talk about it in the book, and it was a very middle class school in the Oklahoma City School District, and many of those kids probably have parents that have not attended college. And they did a penny drive, and they wanted to give me a check for $1,000, and it turned out to be like $1,100, almost $1,200. And they had decided that they were going to duct tape their principal to the wall if they could raise $1,000. And so that's what they did. They had this big assembly, and I got to go, and they presented me with a check, and we got to watch their assistant principal be duct taped to the wall. And so those kids have no idea right now. I don't think they have no idea the impact that they made on me, on those families, and and on our community, and they just wanted to do something good. And there were so many people that did so many things like that, that did little fundraisers or put a bucket out on their tailgate, or, you know, created the wristbands to sell. It was just amazing and heartwarming to see the various truly thoughtful support in so many different ways.
I hope those students have been able to come see the memorial. Some of them.
I hope so too. You know, in the book, I really wasn't going to talk about some of the real painful graphic details, but a couple of the people I interviewed and the families that told their stories, I felt like that they probably wanted people to know just how much of a grind this was for them in their lives and how it altered their existence. And so I did. I kind of went down that path and talked about how, you know, this one man had his hands under his wife's head and realized the blood is coming from her head, and she survived. But I wasn't going to talk about that kind of stuff. But I felt like it was important for people to see the reality of this tragic event. And so it's not a book that elementary students are reading.
That's true.
But I would love for those students to know the impact that they made. And I think one day many of them will know. I've given the school some books. And I hope that one day they'll be able to share those with those graduates that were in that class that helped raise money. And they're special people.
You may see some of them cross the stage here.
I hope so. I bet we will.
Stay long enough.
I feel certain that we will. I feel certain that a lot of those kids are inspired to do something special one day.
You never imagined you'd be sitting here from Guyman, Oklahoma, huh?
No. But I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for the willingness to have you let me tell my story. And
well, since you've moved around some, do you consider Stillwater home?
Oh, absolutely.
Stillwater home?
Yeah. We've been back here almost 25 years now. So most of my life has been lived in Stillwater. You know, if you add my 4 years of my college career, I mean, I've spent most of my life here. So, yeah.
So you're here for the next 10, 20, 30?
as long as I can, as long as they'll let me call it home. So.
Are you planning that far ahead, like 5 years from now? What are you hoping to be, or where are you hoping to be?
I don't know. I don't know what the next chapter holds. We'll just see. You're right. I could never imagine that I would be the director of this foundation, and it's the stars aligned, and this is where I'm placed.
Seems like the best part of the job is meeting the people. Is actually the people, face-to-face people contact.
Truly, yeah, without a question. The people that we interact with on a daily basis, they mold us, they inspire us, they fuel us, you know, and the people make this community great, and beyond, people that I get to meet, you know, from outside Stillwater. But yeah, absolutely, it's what keeps me going.
I've asked all my questions. I have one more. If there's something else you want to add before I ask it.
I think we covered a lot.
Well, I usually end with asking the person how they want to be remembered. How do you want people to remember Scott Petty?
Well, I think as a giving, grateful human being, you know, I've been inspired by people that I've been able to work with, the donors that I've been able to work with. I've been inspired by the service that I've witnessed, and I'm grateful to be able to be a small part of it. And we're fortunate to have the great community that we live in, and having grown up in a small town, This is still a small town, but to me, growing up in a town of 8,000 people, this was kind of like a little city, you know. So I'm just grateful for having been given the opportunity to come to school here and call it my home.
Well, I'm grateful for you giving me your time today, so thank you very much.
Thank you again for and all that you all do at the library. I appreciate you.